Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
Back to Open Your Eyes. We're now moving into our first segment of courtesy Fulltech Systems. Thank you so very much. We are about to have a conversation on the National Assembly and Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. We've got two reps in with us. As a matter of fact, we've got Valerie Woods, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and also Carolyn Trench Sandiford, who is the President of the Senate. Good morning and welcome to both of you.
Good morning to both John and Marlene. It's always a pleasure to be on Open Your Eyes. And Marlene, I want to say how happy I am that you're on Open Your Eyes, because I was having a care moment that you would have left the Open Your Eyes as well.
No pressure, right? No pressure.
Well, I'm going to make sure she stays right here with it.
Thank you, John, and I'll hold you to that.
All right. So, you know, I've read over and I've watched the site as well for the National Assembly and Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and trying to get an understanding of exactly what it is, what it does. And that is exactly where I'd like to start this conversation. What is the CPA? Can you explain to us what this is, National Assembly and Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and what it does?
Sure. Sure. Morning again, John and Marlene. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is exactly as it states. It's the association of all parliaments within the Commonwealth, and it roles and really is to function as a support mechanism and a guiding force, if you will, for members of Parliament. Parliament being both the House of Representatives and the Senate, where two chambers exist. Some do still have unicameral. And what they do is provide various forms of training on various aspects of being a parliamentarian. That's from your roles and responsibility, duty, obligation as a parliamentarian, the do's and don'ts, if you will, in the House, in the Senate, understanding, appreciating standing orders, working with parliamentarians to update, revise standing orders, working with the parliamentary staff in the administration of or various parliaments in the region. And the National Assembly, among many other things, but it really is providing that support. And it also allows a great opportunity for networking and sharing of experiences with other parliamentarians who are grappling, quite frankly, with the same issues in the Senate and in the House. What we're doing today is actually the second day of a 3-day training series with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and Belize's National Assembly, House and Senate. And that is an effort that really was made possible through a memorandum of understanding that was signed between the CPA and Belize's National Assembly last year. And that was done under the leadership of the former Speaker of House, Laura Tucker Longsworth, and the former President of the Senate, Darrell Bradley, at the time. And that MOU sets out, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong here, Carolyn, but it's about six to seven activities. One activity was completed right after the election held in November, and that was the production of a parliamentarian's handbook. It was a first attempt at that in Belize. And so when the new parliamentarians came in, both House and Senate, they were given this handbook, which is just a general introduction on all things Parliament. It's not as comprehensive. It certainly needs a little bit more work, and it's considered a living document. We're now on to number 2 activity, which is this training, and it's entitled aptly Post-Election Seminar Series, intended primarily for first-time parliamentarians, and you know most of our parliamentarians this time around are new, but also for those returning parliamentarians to, one, refresh, do a refresher, if you will, but also to share experiences and to enrich the discussion because of their experiences in Parliament. And there are several other activities after this, this one that's planned, which is includes a code of conduct development. I think we can all agree that it's very timely that we get this done.
Jumping into that one early, Madam Speaker, if I may interrupt. So, but I did want to get that clarification because we don't often think of whether or not or parliamentarians are trained or what type of training goes into their preparation for when they'll participate in either House meetings or Senate meetings. So help us understand that aspect before we move forward.
I think one of the things I wanted to add to what Madam Speaker has said is that this relationship and the memorandum of understanding between the National Assembly and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association actually came out of a report, an assessment report that was done. And that assessment report identified particular benchmarks for democratic legislature. And so it involved, of course, a number of things. And going back to the activities that Madam Speaker has previously stated, these activities all came out of the fact that the legislature in Belize was felt that there was a need for these activities to improve our democracy and to improve the role and functionality of the legislature in our governance system. And when we speak of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, it's a number of nations that are amongst the Commonwealth, all having a long history of the same type of governance system, simply by virtue of us having been former colonies of the United Kingdom. And so it's that commonality that we share that strengthens that parliamentary association as to what the legislature can do to function at the highest standard in terms of delivering on its role and responsibility. So I think when we start talking about what we are now doing, I think it's important to understand that there was a assessment that took place, and it was this assessment that identified particular gaps that we felt that it was important to be improved. And as Madam Speaker has indicated, we looked at the assessment report and we felt that it was important for us to continue because if you notice, it spans two governments. And so it was important for us to continue because we felt there was a need for this.
And if I could add to what Madam President said, I have the benefit of having served as a senator appointed by the opposition when that benchmark survey was done. And so I'm particularly pleased to see with a change of government that continues, because from then, really both the opposition and the government at the time they came together and understood that we definitely needed to make some changes. So I'm very glad to see that with the change of government, we have transitioned into continuing implementation of that.
And I think going back, Marlene, if I may just add quickly to what you said earlier, oftentimes the people of Belize see the legislature just within the context of the day.
Yes.
So they would see Madam Speaker presiding over the House a day or two, as in the budget, and they would see myself over the Senate. But the reality it's a whole ecosystem of numerous components. And what the assessment looked at, for example, from issues of remuneration and benefits to professional development, to infrastructure, to the organization of the legislature itself, the committees, the role of government and the opposition, because one of the key things that often comes out is that we tend to have a winners-all system. And so oftentimes it is felt, and I think Madam Speaker can speak to this, being in an opposition role is different from being in a government role. It even looked at the staff, gender issues, and many other issues, from budget and resources, as she said, to code of conduct, to our role within diplomacy, and so on and so forth. So I think within that context, this gives us a great opportunity to begin the process of sharing with the Belizean people as well.
Right.
What one would consider the benchmarks of a democratic legislature, what happens in other countries, because as Madam Speaker said, almost countries are grappling with some of the same issues.
Yeah.
And I think the seminar that we're going through this week, to some extent, exposes our parliamentarians as well to some of these very issues. But as important, it is also sharing some of how you navigate. What are some of the approaches and best practices in terms of navigating? And you spoke earlier, Marlene, about issue of training.
Yeah.
Our system is such that there are certain criteria, as you know, for us to offer ourselves to serve, because that is democracy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there is a role of the legislature. And I think having this post-election seminar immediately after the election, at the start of the parliamentary sessions for both the senators and the members of the House, so that also broaden their horizon and contributes to their knowledge and awareness, perhaps, of what that true role of being a legislature is all about.
And how do you measure effectiveness of the sessions? Unfortunately, in this country, you know, we and it's not unique to Belize, let me be clear. You know, there's more attention paid to the fireworks and the mudslinging and the scandals. And we no longer, I'm not sure what measure we now use to say that was an effective session, whether at the Senate or at the House of Representatives, or even behind the scenes in the committee meetings.
Well, that's a very, very good point. I've always maintained, Marlene, that change will only come at the rate and pace in which society wants it and demands it. But we also have to appreciate that we have to understand roles. If for decades upon decades, that is what we view our parliament to be, as I'll use your term, you know, the mudslinging that used to go on in the House. And it's really, I will admit, primarily in the House. Then that is what society has had ingrained, for the most part, on how it's done, and it will never change. But incrementally, I think over time, it won't happen immediately after the session, but over time you will see it. You know, one has to appreciate, and I think you asked earlier, one wouldn't think that a parliamentarian necessarily need training. None of us has had training in what it means to be a parliamentarian, understanding how you debate, and the parameters in which you're given to debate, because they're clear, they're rules. Let me not say clear, because some of it definitely needs some improvement. But over time, if you were to assess, for example, I would say a year or two from now, how parliamentary discourse has evolved, I think that will be how we measure. It cannot be that we use it as theater or for grandstanding. You can get your solid points across, and you can make some solid counterpoints, but it must be based on facts and not necessarily personal attacks. And that's going to take a while for our own society, because let's be honest with ourselves. Many of us quite enjoy the theater that is on display, and even more because it's live streamed.
Yeah.
Before it wasn't live streamed, so you heard a third party account or a journalist report. But now it's there fully in front of you, naked as if you will. And human nature, we like that. And so we too will have to adjust to the fact that, there's a line, that's a very delicate balance, because it is about freedom of speech. But there is a line that one has to be very mindful of all the time. Like as I said in the last sitting of the House, I get it. We're not going to Sunday school when we go to our house meeting. It's not a church service. However, it's not a flea market. It's not a pub crawl. It's not a bar fight either.
But it is a platform, isn't it? Because
it is a platform to fully express. Remember, at all times, parliamentarians are first and foremost in that house. They're area representatives.
They're representatives.
First and foremost. And that is the space given to voice their concerns and to express the issues of the day that matters first and foremost to their constituents and the wider public. So it is that platform afforded to them, but what it is not is a platform afforded to them to personally attack persons or to disrespect one another.
Yeah.
And that's where the referee role of presiding officers come in, which is just, as Madam President said, really one, perhaps the most important, or the most viewed one role of presiding officers. There's the back of house, if you will, operation that nobody really gets to see, but which both the president and I have quickly had to learn in the last 5 months, from the diplomacy role to the outreach role to the training role and facilitating training opportunities for all parliamentarians.
Yeah.
It is a tough spot to be put in. I mean, if you use a sports analogy, you know, how you feel about the ref is based on how your team is performing, and not about the actual rules, right?
Nobody likes the ref.
When you're losing, they don't.
Yes. But there's always the gallery, you know, even in the sports world, there's always the gallery who is watching very carefully how that referee is calling. Yeah. And so, to my mind, that is as important. But I think Madam Speaker touched a key point of the fact that the legislature is a representation of the people. That's part of our democracy. And it's very important in terms of the effectiveness as to how people will make that determination. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as quite rightly said, with even within the Senate, which is different, of course, from the House in the sense that the Senate itself has evolved, and I believe there is a need for people to become more aware of the role of the Senate within the legislature, and the fact that it has evolved, that the Senate is no longer a rubber stamp, so to speak, because primarily that was how the Senate was viewed. Yeah. So even the debate that takes place in the Senate initially used to be a carryover, so to speak, from the House of Representatives, arguing the points that may have been ventilated in the House. Yeah. Now with the Senate, there is the government side, there is the opposition side, and there's also now social partners and civil society side. And so when you add, for example, the opposition with social partners, you have 7 to 6. So the role then of the leader of government business, to my mind, has been has become even more important in terms of putting forward the legislative agenda of the government side, because he must not only have his or the government membership on board, but you must also be able to convince the social partners to join the government. And I think that sort of evolution has been strengthening our democracy in terms of having diverse voices. The difference also in terms of from the House is that while you are representing area, and so you have a duty and an obligation to bring to the forefront the issues and challenges of your particular constituency. In the Senate, it's a bit different. Civil society is bringing forward the views of their respective groupings, whether it's the union, the church, business, or the NGO community, as well as that of the government and that of the opposition. So I think when we're dealing with the activities of the MOU, I think there's a lot of issues that we have already begun to see from the Senate standpoint, where we have to be able to strengthen our democracy in terms of the reform process that we take through. Yeah. For example, the standing orders of the Senate, which has been there from 1967, did not anticipate the role of social partners.
That's right.
So these are some of the issues why the MOU, I think, to having done the assessment, is very timely at the start of a new parliamentary session, for us to be looking at all these areas and to see ways in which we can improve and strengthen our democracy and the role of the legislature in its oversight and scrutiny. Recently, at the recent Senate meeting, for example, we approved the Senate approved the representation of the Public Accounts Committee, which started in Madam Speaker's chamber, which initially was just a committee that was in one chamber. Now we have a Public Accounts Committee which combines the chambers, so it's a joint committee. But as important, it gives, as far as I know, Madam Speaker, it has 9 membership, of which 3 comes from the Senate, and it was specific that it was the social partners. 2 come from the opposition in the House, and 4 comes from the House of Representatives. That in itself is saying to the Belizean people that as we journey in the legislature and as we evolve, the role of the legislature in terms of its scrutiny and oversight has to become one that is important and critically placed within our governance system if we are not going to be 10 years from now at the same place talking about too thief and too corrupt, and where we can elevate the conversation. Now, I have to agree with Madam Speaker to say that it is also, you have to always have the what you call the little entertainment.
The theatrics.
And yes, and the theater and the drama and the pageantry, because that also makes it exciting. And to go back to your analogy, Marlene, in a sports world, nobody wants to see a game that is boring. You want to see an exciting game. That's what attracts people to the activity. You want this excitement that you're watching the referee very carefully to see, like in basketball, if the ball really gone on the edge, if it may out, for if the referee calls foul, whatever. You're watching all that. And I think that's the role that Madam Speaker and I have, that we're navigating to ensure that the Belizean people is appreciative of the role. And I think they work with the CPA and the work that we are also doing together, because it's cross-party. We have representation from within
from every
exactly, from the House, from the government, from the opposition.
We saw some images of the Zoom that was on the National Assembly page, where you have opposition House members and senators, and you have the civil society represented. But let's go back to, you're looking at professional development, and that is a critical part for the individual players, but the system itself, as I know, has been identified repeatedly by presiding officers, that it is outdated. The rules, put it that way, were compiled at a time where everything was different, not to mention the fact that it's broadcast on the internet for every person to see and to catch every detail of what takes place. What is the plan to be able to update and modernize the standing orders so that you can have more trained parliamentarians, but also have a system where they can also be more effective?
Certainly the standing orders, well, let's also put in perspective too, that the actual National Assembly building is also outdated. So when we talk about ecosystem and infrastructure, it's the entire gamut of that, right? Even the access to information, Marlene and John, is outdated. And I'm talking in terms of the building itself, not to digress too much, but in terms of the building itself, it's not just that it was a building built for 18 men when it was built. And we're now at 31 plus parliamentary staff. It's the fact that it did not.
And women.
Wait, isn't there a story that the National Assembly didn't have a female bathroom behind the scenes for members?
Yes, correct. And even the current bathrooms leave much to be desired. And then there's also, let's not forget, the Assembly must also cater to the public galleries and the media. And so services to them also are lacking.
And the persons with disability as well. Let us be mindful for it to be inclusive. To say that
it's not an inclusive system. So that's on the agenda. It's a very it's a high-hanging fruit, that one that has to work towards, but I can certainly tell you that both the president and I have hit the ground running in establishing it needs to be addressed. We're already looking at conceptual drawings and to see how and where and how much of it can be accomplished in this parliament session. In addition to that, the safeguarding of the record management leaves much to be desired.
Wow.
There's documents there that date back as far back as 1886, for example. That is one disaster away from being destroyed. And there's several other documents. So there's also the effort and the recognition that we need to do much better at digitizing and ensuring that we safeguard these historical records. But back to standing orders specifically, everything, one has to remind themselves that whatever changes are to come about in both House and Senate must come with full buy-in and recommendation to the floor by the members.
Yeah.
So the standing orders revision, modernization of it, revising of it, updating it, which dates back to 1966 in the case of the House, have to have a working committee for the House, Senate, for the House standing orders, which is slightly different, but not too different from the standing orders for the Senate. So this, there will be working committees of both chambers making recommendations, and that will go over a series of meetings with a joint working group, or we may decide it may need to be separate working groups because of the fact that the Senate has its own standing orders than the House. For example, we're not there yet. Yeah. And then after a draft has been developed, one that is sufficiently we feel, meaning the working group feels it would be accepted, then that has to then be presented to the respective committees that deal with standing orders. And then once those have been looked at and there's agreement that we can maybe go forward, then you present it. It presents itself as a motion in the House to be amended. So it's a process that has to start first with one, agreeing, accepting the standing orders is outdated, need revision, and I think for the most part we've all accepted that. Yes. And two, to then establish the joint, a working group among the members themselves to begin to put in place some of what those proposed revisions would be. And let me say this, it's not reinventing the wheel. In the Commonwealth, many of our assemblies are going through the exact same experiences with standing orders. Trinidad and Tobago, for example, their most recent revision dates back to 2015. So they're a bit more advanced with us in both their standing orders for the House and the Senate. Their standing orders for the Senate has had several revisions, in fact, more so than the House. And I believe their most recent one, if I'm not mistaken, for the Senate dates back to 2016. So they have advanced the effort that we are currently going through. And that's just standing orders. There's also an effort on the way right now. Carolyn and I have initiated that as one of the activities under the MOU, which is the Code of Conduct, to develop a draft Code of Conduct for the Parliament. And so we've established a joint working group, which has to go through the similar process. These are members from both the government and opposition and the Senate and their representation to come up with a set of draft guidelines for Code of Conduct. And then we have to go through that process, which will be many weeks of virtual sessions with the working group before we present it to the wider group and hopefully for adoption. I would like to be optimistic and say later this year, but the test will always be when members have to see what they will have to abide by, and it may delay, right? But
and ensuring they change their behavior, because that's
absolutely.
But you know,
And I think-
I've always said, because I hear the stories all the time of people saying, well, you know, they're going to sanitize it, and in this country they throw shoes, and in this country they do this, and I hear all of that.
We've seen that,
But
yeah.
you know, I also say, and I heard once that a good orator can tell you to go to hell, and you want to go. So it's you can still have a
Absolutely.
great dialogue.
And you know,
Exactly.
the beauty of appreciating our language,
Yeah.
English language, but also our local languages. There is the rule of the parliament that the official language is English. However, as I've stated publicly in the House, by no means will I limit that you absolutely cannot go into the Creole language or even the Maya or the Spanish or the Garifuna, but it cannot be that your discourse, your debate, your contribution is in that language. The official language is English.
Yeah,
But if you
absolutely.
want to stress a point and emphasize a point, I am obviously not only Creole girl's sister,
Yeah.
but I appreciate that I get my point across better when I put it in the Creole language, right?
Yeah.
But in Parliament dealing with legislation, you cannot do that.
Okay.
You may want to emphasize a singular point, and all I ask is when you do so, you also explain what you mean.
Yeah.
Because remember, back of house, you have persons transcribing and will have to then go back and figure out for the official record, the Hansard, what did this member mean by that? So there's a reason why it is stated like that.
Okay.
But that also brings that element of flair and entertainment, but it has to be monitored. And that's a little job that Madam President and I have to.
I must say that.
The
I must say-
reality is that language is colorful.
Yes, it
our
is.
Creole language is colorful, and I think those are the little things that often are the catchy slogans that people remember. Because if you really speak to people about House meetings or Senate meetings, they would normally refer to that particular slogan. I think the last one I keep hearing is something about something. Who do it? Who walk in it?
Yeah.
At least my understanding of that. I think was
Well,
by the Honorable
one of the popular
Francis
ones
Ford
was,
Singer.
"Now watch me, watch yourself."
Watch yourself, right?
Now ask me, ask your pa. And
Yeah.
then only a Creole person can appreciate.
Would understand. And we are in Belize, and I think it's also important for democracy, because democracy is about being inclusive.
That's right.
And for all persons. And I think that is important. I want to mention, though, that one of the differences, I think, also between the House and the Senate, which I must mention, is that the Senate has 4 committees, sessional committees. So we do have a standing order committee, a House committee, a committee of privileges, and a regulations committee. And at one of our recent Senate meetings, we have appointed membership to that committee. So one of the things that we have been doing in terms of the memorandum of understanding with the CPA is to see where synergies can be created so that we can achieve some of the things which we had set out to do. Our standing order committee includes Senator Michael Perry-Feet, Senator Osmani Salas, and Senator Colette Montejo. So you see, it has one from the government, one from the opposition, and one from social partners. And so we already, in other words, we're a little bit ahead of the game in that we have already formed our committee. So we are now merging that with one activity of the MOU, which is the standing orders reform. And so it is within this committee that we will now start talking about how is it that the standing orders can be modernized.
Yeah.
One thing, Madam Speaker, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, Madam Speaker, but the whole issue of having meetings virtually. You know, that yes, COVID-19 forced us to do many things, but the reality is that virtual meetings are initially, all meetings had to be face-to-face at the National Assembly. That is one form of modernization that has already started to take place. So clearly, we have a lot of areas that we wish, whether it's the physical infrastructure, whether it's the conduct, whether it's the standing orders, the processes and procedures. And I think this is what they being part of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association is very important and very critical, because what it does is for us to see what's happening in other parliaments, what they're doing, what are best practices. In fact, one thing that came out of our meeting on Monday is the whole role of private member bills, which is something that has not necessarily been an area of practice within our parliaments. Our bills have been focused primarily. I think we've only had, I understand, 2 or 3 cases of private member bills passing coming from the government side. But there is a provision for private member bills. It's just that we have not utilized it. And exactly. So I think even this process allows us to outreach to the Belizean people, to create awareness of really what the standing orders does and what are these processes and procedures. And yes, there is entertainment, and we do love the theater and the pageantry and the drama. Even I, sitting as president, I'm sitting there sometimes and I would want to crack up on something, because I am like, okay, but that's what it is. But the important thing is for the Belizean people to get a little bit more into what the house is all about, and to also know, and I have to go back to this, Marlene and John, because we have talked about it all the time, how we can elevate the conversation, the dialogue, the merit and demerits of the bill. Ensure that people understand these bills and the impact that it is going to have on their lives. That is something that is very important. And that we move away from everybody thief and everybody corrupt to the point where, yes, the entertainment is good, but that the debate and the dialogue is rich. And I think the more the Belizean people are knowledgeable, because knowledge and information, you spoke about how we monitor whether something is effective. The more we share the role of Parliament and its oversight and scrutiny role in our governance system, I think the more the Belizean people will understand and appreciate, this why there's a distinction between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. And that key role that legislature being lawmakers, and its key role has been oversight and scrutiny as to the work of the government. I think that needs to be elevated.
All right, so Madam President.
I just wanted to say that transparency in all of it will help to get the public more engaged. When you have committee meetings, and I've attended a few as citizen, Valerie, when you have committee meetings that nobody really knows when they're happening or they're closed to the public, it really doesn't give the wider society a sense of new rules or laws that are about or could possibly go into place that impacts their lives. So the more we make that public as a parliament, the better people will get engaged, the more, even if the commentary comes on the Facebook streaming, even if the commentary comes by way of email, everything doesn't really have to be in person, but it will strengthen democracy and it will elevate the discussion so that people, quite frankly, can look up to being a member of the House, not for the theatrics, but for the impact and positive impact that can be created in people's lives. So I'm optimistic.
So Madam President and Madam Speaker, you guys have actually put clarity to exactly what goes on. But I just want to take 1 minute to any of you to explain what you expect to come out of today's seminar.
Today's actually seminar is I think it's probably going to get more engagement, because the first session is going to be about standing orders and the need to revise it, modernize it. Second session is going to be about code of conduct, ethics, and standards. And the third session will be about the parliamentary committees and how those should be governed, or what should go on in those, which for the most part, as of today, is still closed for the most part. So that's going to be interesting. And there's a final session geared toward women presiding officers, which is open to just the two of us, the president and the Speaker of the House. And that's, quite frankly, we still have a long way to go. in the Commonwealth in gender equality in that regard. There are very few women presiding officers. So for the few of us, we get to navigate some of the issues that are common to all of us as women presiding officers. So today, I actually looking forward to today because it's going to be interesting.
And how have our representatives been participating, or Senate and House members? Have they been showing up to their professional development courses?
Yes, I'll be frank, I'm disappointed on the numbers on the House side for Monday, but I have been assured that today and Friday there'll be more. The one good thing with virtual is not all of the sessions may necessarily be accessed by all of the persons attending all at the same time, but they can choose which of the sessions they would like to get a little bit more feedback. And please don't let us walk away thinking that after this week, that's it. What this has done is we're already getting a sense from the members who attended on Monday, areas that they really need more information on. And so we can build on that for future sessions. And thanks to COVID, whereas before you may have to select 2 or 3 or 4 reps virtually, almost all parliamentarians can attend a virtual session.
Yep.
Or at least listen in if they're still working.
Let me say also that from the Senate standpoint, we've had 8 of our 13 senators represented at the sessions. So that has been, to my mind, more than 50%. And so that is excellent representation. And one of the presenters at our session was the Honorable Aldo Salazar. He did a presentation on opportunities and challenges of being a parliamentarian. And I felt it was important that we have representation from someone who has been on both sides, being in a position as well as being on the governance side, to understand the opportunities and challenges. So I want to thank the senators, of course, and all parliamentarians. And certainly I'm hoping that we will see an increase representation from the Senate over the next 2 days.
I certainly will. And on the House side, Honorable Oscar Kenya did the presentation on opportunities and challenges. He's been a 4-time parliamentarian, but most of it in opposition. Now he's on the government side. And he spoke to the experience from both perspectives. Having served in the Senate as a senator appointed by the opposition, and now in the neutral chair, which I still have to, that itches me, right? Because there's interesting debate and I just cannot contribute to it. Yeah. But in the neutral chair of being the speaker, I do think that it is so timely that this is happening now when there's a change of government, because if I contributed to which several did as an opposition member, to the need for change and to fill the gaps. Now you're in a position for those who are on the government side to put into action what you would have liked to have seen when you're an opposition member. So I think it's an excellent opportunity, and I thought Honorable Oscar Kenya brought that home in terms of the challenges he experienced. As the chair, I have to remind myself all time that, listen, as a referee now a good basketball game, when you make the call that suits your side, everybody loves you. Yeah. When you make the call that maybe plays to the other side, well, your side not necessarily like you again, right? I get that. But my guiding principle is always going to be the role of that chair. It has to be impartial. And having stuck on the other side as opposition in Senate, I appreciate now more than ever why that chair must be neutral.
All right. Well, Madam President and Madam Speaker, this is where the House now adjourn.
I love it.
Because he said so.
The eyes do have it at this time.
The eyes have it. Thank you, both of you, for
You're
putting
welcome.
into context and clarity exactly what goes on at that level. Thank you. And here's to wishing both of you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We're about to take a break. When we come back, we'll be discussing healthcare treatment for transgenders in Belize. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems. your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.